Yang bersetuju 211, ahli yang tidak bersetuju tiada, ahli-ahli yang tidak mengundi tiada. Lebih 2/3 undi majoriti yang setuju. Rang undang-undang ini dibacakan kali yang ketiga dan diluluskan sekarang.
The Undi 18 bill, which entailed lowering the minimum age for voters in both federal and state election to 18 years old, lowering the minimum age for elected representative in both federal and state election to be 18 years old, and automatic voter registration for Malaysians, were first started as a student movement pioneered by co-founders Nur Yusri and Tarma Pillai. The movement started off slow in 2016, from reaching out to various other youth organizations, not only in Malaysia but all across the globe, to gaining the support of politicians, and finally making history in 2019 when the movement successfully advocated for the amendment of Article 119, Clause 1 of the Federal Constitution. Moving on to the factors of demand which resulted in the birth of Undi 18 movement. One of the co-founder, Kira Yusri, realized the lack of youth representation and involvement in Malaysia political field, and the fact that most leaders, even youth leaders, were way out of touch with the younger generation nowadays. Other than that, it was frustrating that 18 years old in Malaysia were legally considered adults, as they can be reprimanded in a criminal case, receiving the full punishment. They are also subjected to paying taxes and can work to earn a living. They are allowed to drive, even buy their own cigarettes. And in some states, even a 16-year-old can get married, and yet the voting age in Malaysia remains stagnant at 21 years old. Back before the Undi 18 bill was successfully passed, Malaysia was one of the only 10 countries in the world and only 2 Asian countries left, along with Singapore, with the voting age not lowered to 18. Next is the reaction from Malaysians towards the Undi 18 movement. The general reaction received from the Malaysian public when Undi 18 movement first gained traction back in 2017 were that of excitement, fear, judgment, and skepticism. Most news articles were either positively biased or negatively biased towards the movement. Malaysian youngsters were excited that their presence and voices will finally be heard in shaping the political climate of the country. Some, though, did not share the same excitement as they voiced out fears and concerns over the level of maturity held by 18 years old. Mostly, the most hesitant group of people were older and wiser, which led them to believe that even though 18 years old can marry and considered adults in their own aspects such as paying taxes and receiving full criminal sanction, it is not the same when the country's political climate could be dramatically influenced by the turnout of the increased number of voters in the next general election. Hence, their skepticism in the movement.
Moving on to the next part, which is the process of Undi 18 bill in Parliament. Bill is something like a draft which proposed by the Member of Parliament, usually from government side, to be discussed in Parliament. This is the process that must be done in order to create or amend any law. Any rules or laws cannot be implemented without through this process unless the country is under the state of emergency. However, under Article 150, Clause 6A, there are several things that cannot be treated even if the country is in a state of emergency, which are rights related to Islam, Malay customs, religious freedom, civil rights, customary law in Sabah and Sarawak, as well as about the rights of language. Parliament of Malaysia have two houses, which are House of Representative, known as Dewan Rakyat, and House of Senate, known as Dewan Negara. Parliament is under legislative body, which one of its duty is to make or amend the law with several process. There is no difference between process of bill in Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat. This is the process of bill in Parliament. The first process of bill in Parliament, known as first reading. In this phase, a minister which related with the bill will read the complete title of bill without any debate from the member of Parliament. The second process of bill in Parliament known as second reading. It is a situation where the minister will read the title of bill and come out with argument to prove the needs of implementation the bill. The process will continue with the MPs debate and discuss about the bill before the first vote will be made. The next is committee stage. It is a situation where the MPs will discuss more specific and details about the issue. Here, the MPs will give arguments regarding the bill, such as any acts or any other amendments which related with the bill. The third reading is the last part in bill process in Parliament. No discussion or argument required in this session. In this situation, the minister will reread the title of bill just like in the first reading before the MPs make second vote. Moving on to the process of Undi 18 bill in the House of Representatives, Dewan Rakyat. The Minister of Youth and Sports, YB Said Abdurrahman, was made the first reading on 4th July 2019 with the title of Rang Undang-Undang Perlembagaan Pindaan 2019. On 16 July 2019, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad did the second reading and he was supported by the Minister of Youth and Sport, YB Said Abdurrahman. The debate session took place with 58 MPs expressed a desire to discuss the bill. Voting session on the second reading resulted all 211 MPs vote to agree while 11 MPs were absent, which means no MPs disagree with the bill. Committee stage in the process of Bill Undi 18, there is not any argument or discussion being held here, so that the Speaker proceeds with the third reading. Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, who also the Prime Minister, did the third reading just like he did in second reading, supported by Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then, the Speaker proceeds with the second time voting and the result maintained like before. Hence, the bill was approved by the Dewan Rakyat since 211 of MPs voted agree and 11 MPs absent while no disagree vote arises at Dewan Rakyat. Last but not least, the process of Undi 18 bill in the House of Senate, Dewan Negara. The bill was discussed 10 days after the approval in Dewan Rakyat, specifically on 25th July 2019. The first reading in Dewan Negara, same as the first reading in Dewan Rakyat. Datuk Liew Fui Kiong, who also the Minister in the Prime Minister's office, makes the first reading. For the second reading, Datuk Liew Fui Kiong read the second reading and his suggestion was supported by the Deputy Minister in Prime Minister's office, Tuan Muhammad Hanifah Maidin. There are 24 senators take part in debates. The result shows that the bill approved by more than two-thirds majority voted, with 47 senators vote agree while 20 senators absent. At the committee stage, there are no debates or discussion taking place here, so that the Speaker moved on to the third reading. At the third reading, again Datuk Liew Fui Kiong makes suggestion, with supported by Minister in Prime Minister's office, Tuan P. Watamurti. The voting result for the third reading same as in the second reading, so that the Speaker announced that the bill was approved with more than two-thirds majority of senators voted agree. There are two final stages outside the Parliament before the bill can be a law or the amendments law, which are approval by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and gazetting. Hence, all stage of bill's process was been through, and the Undi 18 is ready to be implemented by the Election Commission of Malaysia, which targeted the General Election 15 is the first implementation of it.
To implement Undi 18, the government has faced several challenges which led to the postponement of Undi 18 being implemented. The first challenging that the government faced during implement Undi 18 is transition of government. Before this, we all know that Tun Dr. Mahathir was the 7th Prime Minister, where this time was the second time he became Prime Minister of Malaysia. Undi 18 was proposed during the second era premiership of Tun Dr. Mahathir, which is on September 2018. After a year, the proposed constitutional amendment bill has been successfully passed, which is to lower the age limit for Malaysian voters on September 2019. Government want to implement the Undi 18, but it delayed because of Tun Dr. Mahathir has resigned as Prime Minister on February 2020 after 2 years being as Prime Minister of Malaysia. The effect of transition of government, Undi 18 could not be implemented as discussed by the ministers because the government at that time had changed. In early 2020, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaysia appointed Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin as the new Prime Minister of Malaysia without going through election. Therefore, the reigns of previous Prime Minister will not be reapplied, and at the same time, all the ministers also need to resign. They also take time to arrange the portfolio to appoint someone to become minister of their portfolio position. The transition of government made Undi 18 delay for a while. The second challenging is pandemic COVID-19 crisis. After transition of government happened, coronavirus, or known as COVID-19, has hit all countries including Malaysia. Because of COVID-19, all activities were stopped for fear of outbreak of COVID-19. However, due to the pandemic COVID-19, the government prioritized its healthy and safety of the people over the implementation of Undi 18. Hence, the government has postponed the registration of voters, which supposedly implement on September next year. Besides, MCO has affected the planning and preparation of the Election Commission to successfully automatic register voters and Undi 18, where it should have been implemented in July 2021. But because of many voters who are already eligible to vote have not yet registered as voters through online registration, it make them which take a few time to make registration. Hence, because of COVID-19 pandemic, Undi 18 has been postponed. Lastly is rearrange and re-update the official portal of Election Commission, or known as Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya (SPR). SPR need to reorganize and re-update their system on the official portal that they have provided to facilitate voters to check, make registration, change the polling station, and others. This is because the eligibility for election voters was 21 years old and above at previous, but after obtaining approval from government bodies, citizens over 18 years old are eligible to vote. Therefore, the Election Commission need to update the portal in terms of eligibility, the procedure of election, and re-update the total of polling station for the purpose of checking by district voting center, or known as Pusat Daerah Mengundi PDM leaders, to find out the total of their voters according to each PDM. In addition, there are many processes that need to do in order to update the status of new voters, because it must refer to National Registration Department to know where PDM the voters need to follow during the day of election. This process also need time to update. All this affected towards implemented of Undi 18 because they must have enough time to re-update and rearrange system at the official portal of SPR.
Hi and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad IZUDDIN bin HASSANUDIN, and today I will be explaining about disadvantages and advantages of the implementation of Undi 18. One of the disadvantages or the worries of the public when Undi 18 is introduced is exploitation of youth because over their incompetency and immaturity. We must first understand that the public is a bit skeptical when they want to give a huge responsibility to the youth. And this is a valid concern, and I myself will be also skeptical when we wanted to give a big responsibility that involve the future of our country to the young youth. For instance, when the government decided to lower the age of legal marriage in 2018, the public backlash and even critique the decision of the government, including myself, because we see that that age is an age where youth just completed their secondary school and their SPM examinations, and in that age, majority of the youth still stay with their parents and still dependent with their parents' money to survive. Thus, this shows that this has built up the perception where youth are not ready to hold such responsibility, marriage, or even voting, and seeing them as not qualified to shackle that burden. However, Mohsin Abdullah, in an article that he wrote in the Age Markets, stated that the problem of Undi 18 is not the maturity of the youth, but the main concerns that the public have is the vulnerableness of youth. Nevertheless, we cannot turn our backs towards youth who are conscious about our politics, who are conscious of the social issues that are rising in our community. That's why Undi 18 can give the autonomy for these kinds of youth. By having Undi 18, youth can have substantive representations for their generation to voice certain issues and certain political demands that are happening in their generation. Especially in this era of pandemic, there are many issues arises among youth, especially in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of internet connectivity, and even ethics in education and administrations. Viviana Musidin can be an example of one of the youth who are struggling to adapt to the new norm or to the new method of learning, and it shows that students or youth who are living in the rural areas are struggling to consecutively commit to their university academics and also to their tests. Not only that, recently a secondary school student was named Ain Usniza was viral for voicing out misconduct of sexual harassment and sexual threats that was happening within the schools, that was conducted by teachers and by her own peers. And the possibility for youth to suffer the same issue as Ain and as Viviana is high, and maybe they have the opportunity to voice out like Viviana or like Ain, to have the publicity, to have the public to pay attention to the issue, and this is concerning for the future of our generations. Thus, by having Undi 18, we can encourage and give the youth to voice out about the issues and the struggles that they suffer. Besides that, government also can gain benefit from Undi 18 because when there are more participants in the general election or maybe in the state elections, the possibility for the rate of voting turnouts to increase is high. We can see based on the 2013 general election when surprisingly the rate of people who participate in the general election is over 84.84%, and this significant increase in people participating in voting is because the increase of numbers of first time voter, especially among the young youth. Youth can be some part of the youth can be categorized as economically underprivileged because most of the youth who are 25 years old below are still in the phase of furthering their studies, and most of their income come from student loans, come from scholarships, and come from daily money or monthly money that was given by their parents' salary. And this has become a challenge for them because they have not the adequate resources to build a platform for them to voice out their concerns on the community. Because of this, some youth take the advantage or take a step in joining non-governmental organizations, joining student unions, and joining clubs in their universities. But sadly, this kind of organizations of student unions only exists or only actively operate in universities, and that's why Undi 18 is created for them, for the youth who are just graduated from SPM, just graduated from secondary school, can voice out the issues that they suffer during their primary or during their secondary school period. That's all from me. Thank you.